right, everyone. My name is Pritesh here with Kaizen Crypto, bringing you another video. I'm really excited to be joined by Sebastien. So he is the co-VP of engineering at Emurgo. If you've ever used the Yoroi wallets, this gentleman, as well as his team, these are the guys that have been putting in the work. So Sebastien, thanks so much for joining us today, man. How are you doing?
Good, I'm doing great. Nice sunny morning here in Japan. And I'm always very happy to talk to the community about the work we're doing. And part of developing a crypto project is not just doing the work, but it's also telling the world about the work you're doing. So I always love to come on and talk about all the exciting things we're doing in Edinburgh.
That's awesome. Yep, a lot of new people coming into Cardano. It's pretty cool to see all those downloads for the Yoroi wallet. So you guys are probably pretty proud of that. I know you've come a long way, and it's just amazing to see all the progress that you guys have been making. So Sebastien, I guess just to start things off, for those people who might not be as familiar, for us, we've seen your face quite a bit, but lots of new people. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and I guess how you got involved in the Cardano and, when did that all get started for you?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Sebastian, as mentioned earlier. I work for Emurgo now, and that's how I initially got involved in Cardano as well. So when I first got interested in Cardano, it was right after the mainnet launch, and I was originally involved kind of as a community member. So I read a bit of the research and read a bit of the code and talked online about the work that IOG was doing. And at the time, Emurgo was trying to start its R&D team. And so they sent an email to me and said, hey, we saw that you've been kind of posting a lot in the community about Cardano from a technical perspective. And they knew I was a programmer because I worked at Microsoft at the time as a software developer. And they also knew I spoke Japanese because I did some of my videos in Japanese as well. And Emurgo originally was a Japanese company, so I was interesting to them also. That's how I joined Emurgo, and I joined as a developer, as a second developer to join Emurgo. And so the first one was Nico, who's the CTO. And once I joined, we were kind of tasked to figure out what should we do as Emurgo, as a company, and how do we grow an R&D team. And part of that ended up being Yoroi, and that's why Yoroi has been an important project for us because we've been using this as the main primary growth product for our R&D team. But it's been quite an adventure over the past few years to grow the team. And as you mentioned, Yoroi is not the only thing we do, but it's our kind of crown jewel in a sense. And we passed over 100,000 active users on all three platforms. So on Chrome, on Android, and iOS, they all independently have over 100K active users. And
Wow.
so it's been quite the journey. And at Emurgo, we've done more than just this kind of product. We've done a lot of kind of in the background work, like the Cardano software development kit for mobile or for browser based development, like JavaScript, WebAssembly, all that stuff. That's also created by us and managed by us. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And I'm sure in this interview, we'll talk a bit more in detail about these projects that I mentioned, and we'll talk a bit more about some of the stuff that we could do in the future.
Yeah, most definitely. So it's a lot of technical stuff there. So, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff of what you guys are doing. So it's pretty cool. And, all the functionalities that we've seen, because I remember when Yoroi was pretty much like with Daedalus, you had a way to be able to store your ADA, you can send and receive, and that's about it. And to see all the progress you guys are making, not on just Yoroi, but to see all these different things now, like you mentioned, SDKs, I'm sure you guys are working with some exchanges to try and help them get up to speed with the staking experience and whatnot. So there's a lot of work that you guys are putting in. So yeah, definitely would be great to talk about some of those points here in this video. Before we get into a lot of the high level stuff though, I wanted to ask you, Sebastien, I know, we've both been in the project for a while. There's so many developments coming up now. What exactly excites you most about Cardano and what's coming up?
Yeah, I think the thing that got me interested in Cardano in the first place was the approach, the philosophy, which was let's kind of think about the problem first, do some deep thought, and then write down our thoughts, share the thoughts with the world, and then do the development. And so that was originally started with IoT, with the research papers. And so I was very much interested in research papers, read a lot of them, made videos about them. Originally, that's kind of how I got found by Emurgo. And so that's the approach of Cardano that really got me interested. But I think what's getting me interested now is mostly Catalyst. So Catalyst is the treasury system for Cardano for people who are not familiar. And anybody in the community can propose treasury proposals to Catalyst and get funding. And the way we do Catalyst proposals is people, write a proposal, put it up on a website called Idea Scale, and then people go review the proposals, think about the proposals, and then if people are interested, then it goes through kind of a triage and it gets improved, and people leave feedback, and then as a final step, it goes up for voting, and people download the Catalyst app and they can vote on proposals, and the most voted proposals actually get funded. And I think this is kind of the next step for the project, because obviously right now it's very hard for users to review all these proposals because there's so many people interested in Catalyst funding, and everybody has a limited amount of time in the day. But in the future, we'll have kind of a way to delegate your voting power. So you can have kind of these experts, you delegate your voting power to experts, and their job is to kind of review proposals and try and figure out which ones are the best. And I think this is super important because this is kind of going to be the core of the project, right? Because in the future, all funding will be developed through the treasury. That's our way to sustain the project indefinitely in the future. Unlike some blockchains that run out of funding and eventually die out, one of the ideas of Cardano is we want to get a sustainable blockchain, which means the treasury will keep going, and anytime anybody, not just IoT or Emurgo or any other company wants to get involved, there's always a funding option, which is always treasury. And the core of the treasury proposal is on this kind of process of let's think about a proposal, make a proposal, get the community to review a proposal, and vote on a proposal. This kind of whole process that we've gone through with IoT. I'll say this is not maybe as rigorous because there's no requirement of going to the science first, but in a sense, it's a similar idea. And this really excites me because if we're right about this process, and that's getting proposals out to people and getting experts to review them, if this actually works, then we're kind of guaranteed that Cardano will always be competitive because we'll always have good quality proposals coming out and people getting proposals funding and actually converting that into value to the ADA holders.
Yeah, completely agree. You touched on so many points there. So Project Catalyst, making Catalyst and voting like the largest decentralized autonomous organization I saw. It was like the largest DAO in the world. And we have, I think, what is it, almost $1 million now in funding for Fund 4 or something like that. So to think about all the businesses that are being built on Cardano with Project Catalyst, I mean, that's really remarkable because like you said, it's going to keep Cardano always in a competitive forefront. The people that are building on Cardano right now, it's pretty amazing to think about. These guys are able to submit an idea. People are able to vote. It's completely decentralized. There's no governing hierarchy, so to speak. It's pretty much a way for people to voice their opinions on what's going to bring most value to the Cardano ecosystem. So I'm really excited about that too. And Sebastien, I know that you also had a proposal in Fund 2. Is that correct? You had a proposal that got funded. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that proposal is not me personally, is as Emurgo. Mm-hmm. And so, as I mentioned, the goal of the treasury system is that in the future, it's anybody, including IoT, including Emurgo, including Cardano Foundation, can ask for funding through the treasury system. And so, as part of that idea, we wanted to kind of get an idea of the process of applying for funding at Emurgo. So we want to know, how does Catalyst work and the whole process and the whole flow. And the best way to get the experience is just to do it yourself. And so we submitted a Catalyst proposal for a very low amount of funding. We asked the equivalent of 500 USD because we weren't trying to get money out of this. Emurgo has enough money to do the development needs right now. But we figured 500 is the equivalent time cost of just writing up the proposal and going through the process. And it's been a great experience to get to, write the proposal, see the community feedback, see the actual proposal appear in the application. I think we've learned a lot from it. In the
Nice.
future, we hope to deliver the proposal, obviously. And so for people who aren't familiar, the proposal is to write a message signing specification for Cardano. So anybody who wants to sign a message to prove ownership of keys can do it in a standardized way. For example, if you want to prove that you're delegating to a stake pool or prove that you own a certain address, this will all be done through a standardized system that will hopefully be integrated in Yoroi wallet and possibly Daedalus or other wallets in the future. So the progress on that for people who want to know is that we wrote a Cardano improvement proposal that defines the specification, and that was approved. And then we've been writing on a SDK for the system that would work similar to our existing Cardano SDK would work, on mobile browsers and so on. And we're kind of hoping to finish that kind of first version probably in the next week or two. And the first
Wow.
version supports the kind of data format for the system we put out in the Cardano improvement proposal. It also supports signing messages. It does not support, however, encrypting messages. So it's something we'd like to add in the future in case somebody wants to sign a proof, encrypt it, and then send it over some sort of untrusted communication channel. It'd be nice to have encryption included. We figured this is not a core feature. This is a nice to have. So we'd like to support the kind of core functionality and the signing functionality first, and then possibly in the future provide the encryption functionality if we think there's a demand for it.
I
So
gotcha.
we've been making a lot of progress on this. I can't guarantee when it'll actually be implemented in the Yoroi extension because our primary focus of the Yoroi extension is always the updates of Cardano itself. Whenever there's a hard fork or a high demand feature that the wallet absolutely needs to have, that's our core focus. And projects like the message sign specification is something that we think is a nice to have for the community. It'd be nice if you could prove that you own a certain address or prove that you're delegating to a stake. Well, obviously, a lot of people would like this feature. But at the end of the day, it's not as important as, for example, Alonso support. There's support for smart contracts or, support for catalyst voting. This kind of core functionality is our main focus. And whenever we have spare cycles, that's when we work on stuff like the message sign specification. So it's hard to give an exact date of if and when this will be implemented inside Yoroi. But I think even just having an SDK already, I think we've given it more than the equivalent of $500 to the community
Yeah.
from this. So
I would agree. Just your time invested alone in creating the proposal, right? I think that's well worth that. Well, it's really cool to get an update on that proposal, and I know you guys are trying to manage all that, in addition to with all the updates happening. So thanks so much for keeping us posted with that proposal. I know you guys are doing lots of work there. I wanted to just shift gears very briefly, still talking about Yoroi. But now what we're seeing with Cardano after the Merry hard fork was all these native tokens, right? So a whole bunch of cool things happening now with Cardano. I wanted to talk about the user experience with Yoroi and holding these native tokens. Could you tell us a little bit, what does that actually look like for the end user? How are native tokens treated in Yoroi?
yeah, so the way they're treated both in Yoroi Mobile and the Yoroi extension is by default, you don't see any assets until you've actually received one. So I've seen some people comment on social media like, hey, where do the tokens appear on Yoroi? For simplicity purposes, we just decided to kind of hide stuff if you have no tokens to show, so it's not super confusing for the users. But maybe we'll change that in the future. But once you receive tokens, if you go to the send page, you'll see a drop down on the send page where you can choose which asset you want to send. And from the send page, you'll be able to see all the different assets you have and the balance. Now, people have wanted a more sophisticated user experience for seeing which assets you have. So for right now, we only show this in the same page, but people have asked us if we could add, different transaction history pages where you can see your transaction history filtered by different tokens. people have asked us if they could have some sort of NFT viewer inside their wallet where they could view the NFTs with the actual images. So people have a lot of suggestions like this, and we're definitely watching social media and taking all these into account. The main reason we didn't want to spend time doing this kind of work right now is because we want to see how the NFTs would evolve and how the assets would evolve and what kind of standards people come up with before we really commit to a user experience. Because if we try and do this ahead of time, we may spend time developing some sort of UI that doesn't end up matching the reality of how people are using these assets. And so we prefer to start off with this kind of simple user experience where you just have it drop down on the send page. And as we look at, for example, there's a current Cardano improvement proposal that's being written. I forget if it's submitted already, but I think it has been, about like an NFT standard on Cardano. And, we can read these and figure out how people are using these tokens and then develop the UI to kind of reflect the reality of the protocol.
Okay, I gotcha. So now, is this type of specification that we're waiting on, is that something that we'll see from IOG? Like, is that something that I guess the community will inevitably agree upon? Like, how does the system kind of come to a standard, I guess?
Yeah, so it depends on the use case, right? So for example, NFTs have been mostly a community-driven effort. And so the effort to standardize the different NFTs that have already been created on Cardano to some sort of agreed upon format, especially for the transaction metadata, that's been mostly community driven. There's some other stuff that is, mostly driven by IOG and us, which is, standards for how to display assets inside the wallet. For example, you might have seen like the assets taker, asset one, blah, 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 that shows up. So that's, a standard that IOG came up with for how to represent these tokens. And so you'll see kind of a mix of standards that we come up with, a mix of some stuff the CF came up with. For example, there's a token metadata server that the CF has been working on, which will keep information about, asset names, which will support UTF-8 and a bunch of other metadata associated tokens that won't be stored on chain. So the Cardano Foundation has their own kind of standards for this that they're working on, and then we'll see a mix of community standards. So it's not just one person. It's kind of an open process, and many different companies and people are getting their ideas out there. And the great thing about the Cardano proposal is just because you're making a proposal does not mean that people have to implement it or have to go that direction. You're kind of putting an idea out there to the world, and you're opening this conversation and seeing what people come up with. And sometimes you make a proposal, people like the proposal, but then that doesn't end up getting implemented, and somebody comes in and says, I have a different idea, we can go this different direction. And that's the one that ends up getting traction. And this is just the nature of a growing ecosystem. And this happens in every blockchain project, right? And so the important thing is that the conversation is happening. I mean, people are proposing their ideas. And as the ecosystem evolves, they'll eventually end up being kind of a dominant standard that emerges. And that's what we'll end up, having inside wallets. And, this happens all the time. Like ERC20, the term ERC20 is because it's the 20th ERC standard in Ethereum, right? So this is something that somebody proposed and said, what do you guys think about this? And people agreed with it. Some people came up with different ERC proposals that are slightly different than the ERC20 with different trade-offs. And, it's hard to tell as a developer which one will become the market standard, right? And so there's a certain amount of watch and see what happens. And obviously, as Emurgo will be involved in all the discussions, reviewing the proposals, commenting on the proposals, and so on. And we'll play an active role in trying to shape the future of the ecosystem. But at the end of the day, it's not entirely up to us. We have to play kind of off what the community is doing.
I gotcha. Okay, well, let's kind of talk a little bit. So now we've got a pretty good idea of what we're expecting with tokens. I wanted to talk about Dapps. I know because a lot of people are excited about Goguen, Win Alonso, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see, the functionality of the Yoroi, both the extension and if we're going to have some capabilities there with Yoroi Mobile. I guess, could you give us a high level of some of the functionality with using Yoroi in certain dApps?
Yeah, so currently we're working on what we're calling a Dap Connector. So the way people have been using the Yoroi extension is kind of as a safe wallet that lives in your browser. So it's convenient that's in your browser, but it's also totally blocked out from any other website. No other website can access Yoroi. Yoroi can't access any other website. It's kind of walled in. And people really want the security from their wallet. You know, if you ask people, why don't you use a browser-based wallet that runs entirely in a website? Most people cite security risks. They say, I don't want my browser running in a website. I don't know what's happening in my browser. You know, there could be a virus that's injecting into web pages. I don't know what's going to happen. And so people have a real hesitation to running a wallet that runs inside of a web page. Now, with the browser extension, you can add additional security features that really locks it down and adds extra safety against, you know, any malicious software the user might have on their computer. And so people have a higher degree of trust with a browser extension. Now, to have a Dap connector, it means now you're saying that your trusted extension, your trusted wallet can not only communicate with web pages, and it kind of opens a door in a sense. And not everybody will be comfortable with that. Some people want kind of the totally locked down version, and some people will want to have this, you know, door open that allows you to communicate with websites. And to kind of provide both these options to users, there's going to be an in-between, which is the Yoroi Dap connector, and that's going to play the role of communicating between the two. So if you have a Dap connector, then Yoroi will communicate with websites. If you want to stop that functionality, you just disable the connector, and then you're back to the kind of walled off zone. And we think this is the best way to kind of maintain the security of the Yoroi extension, while also providing this functionality, this Dap connection functionality that all our users are asking for. Now, for this functionality, there's two things. One is we're developing it for Emurgo first, which is a separate blockchain that has this kind of similar smart contract system as Cardano. And so we have that almost ready. We have all the core functionality done. We're just making some final tweaks, but all the functionality is there. And once we have that done, then we'll start working on the Cardano connector, which is the same UI we've already developed. So a lot of the work will be reused, but just creating Cardano functionality. And for that, we'll have to write a Cardano improvement proposal that defines the API we're thinking for that connection. So there'll be some community involvement and so on for this. We're working on this. We've already been working on this for a little while. Now, the things that I mentioned, this is for the Yoroi extension, and we're getting a different solution for Yoroi mobile. So the way Dapps work for browser extensions is totally different from the way they work for Yoroi mobile. And for Yoroi mobile, we're still kind of in the investigation stage. So we have a few different ideas of ways we could go about doing this. We're in talks with some other companies that have their own ideas for SDKs for how we could do this. We haven't quite settled on a decision. If you look at the Dap connection functionality across the different blockchains, everybody always gets the kind of browser support first because the ecosystem for that is so much easier. And in mobile, there's a few different ways, different wallets and different blockchains have tried to approach this problem. But I wouldn't say anybody's got like a clear winner for the user experience. So we're also looking at what other people are doing and what we can do. And we haven't quite settled something for Yoroi mobile. And so we expect that we'll have the browser support come first, and then mobile will come at some point in the future.
Okay, so I wanted to just briefly touch on a point that you made there. So, and you can just let me know what your thoughts are on this because I'm still trying to grasp the concept myself. But as it comes to security with Yoroi, I know a lot of people have a concern with it being a browser extension. So if you have this on your computer, maybe they would say, well, what happens if somebody hacks my computer? Like, are my funds still safe? And I guess from my understanding is as long as you have your seed phrase, you know, you've got your wallet recovery phrase, your private key, pretty much your funds are safe. But then I guess from a user standpoint and peace of mind with security, would there be any type of integration as we see Yoroi now being integrated with some of these dApps as it comes to like two-factor authentication in order to access Yoroi? You know, you got your little YubiKey, like NFC type of security. Like, is that something that you guys are developing? Is that something that's being talked about, or would that even make sense?
Right. So for Yoroi, currently we support hardware wallets, right? So we support both Trezor and Ledger on the browser extension, and on mobile we support Ledger devices. And the security model of ledger devices and trusted devices is that even if the wallet itself gets compromised, like say total nuclear scenario, somebody gets access to our account and they upload a fake version of the extension to all our users. This is obviously the worst case scenario, and we have a bunch of protections in place. But the benefit of a hardware wallet is even if this totally disastrous situation happens, you're still safe. And the way that happens is that whenever Yoroi tries to do anything, it has to communicate with the hardware wallet, and the hardware wallet will display exactly what's happening on the device. That's why if you ever try to use a hardware wallet to send a transaction, you'll see on your actual device, be it Trust or Ledger, a confirmation flow that says, are you sure you want to send this transaction, which sends this amount of money to this person, and blah, 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 blah. And so you get the whole confirmation flow on your device. So if for example, Yoroi, gets hacked in the scenario I mentioned previously, and the wallet tries to send your money to some other random person, to the hacker or so on, you'll get a message in your wallet saying, are you sure you want to send all your money to this address? And you're like, no, that's not what we want to do. And so this gives you extra security. For example, it goes even further, which is when you want to receive ADA, you usually go to your receive page, you take your address, you send copy paste that, send that over to a friend. If you have a hardware wallet, there's a verify button beside the address. And if you press the verify button, you'll get a pop-up on your wallet device saying like, make sure this address matches what you see on the screen. And if it matches what you see on the screen, then you know this address really was generated from your hardware wallet, and that Yoroi is not, through some bug or otherwise showing you the wrong address. So that's how hardware wallets really give you a peace of mind via the hacking scenario. Even if your computer is compromised, or Yoroi is compromised, you still get this safety. And this is good enough for the majority of people. The problem is that not everybody has a hardware wallet. Not everybody wants to spend money on hardware wallet. The cost is not that high, especially since a lot of people, through the rise of price in ADA, have a lot of money held in these assets. And so it's very much worth the money to buy a trusted device and give yourself peace of mind. But obviously not everybody wants to do that. For these users, there's a few options we can have. Unfortunately, 2FA, two-factor authentication, is not quite easy, because the way that two-factor authentication works is by having part of the secret live on a trusted server, right? And we don't want to have a trusted server that keeps track of your key. That's kind of against the point. And so kind of traditional 2FA that you might see, for example, on Binance, doesn't work for us. Because, for example, like if you're using Binance to trade and you forget your 2FA, you can contact Binance and say, I lost my 2FA. Here's proof that I'm a person. Please reset my account. And they'll reset your 2FA and you'll be able to sign again. It doesn't make sense to be like contacting Yoroi and be like, hey, I forgot my password. Can you unlock my account? Like, we don't want to have this power, right? And so it's kind of this traditional 2FA flow. It doesn't quite work. Some wallets try and handle this by having the wallets both, for example, in the Yoroi extension and the Yoroi mobile. And if you ever want to sign a transaction with the Yoroi extension, you pop up your mobile device and kind of use Yoroi mobile to be like the second part of the signing. And there's a few ways that can actually be implemented, but we haven't spent time on this. Currently, our suggestion for people who want the extra security is just buy a hardware wallet, trust your device. It's not that expensive, and you get a lot of security out of it. So that's our suggestion.
Very nice. Very nice. That's noted. Hardware wallets for security. Absolutely. So before we kind of change gears, I know we had mentioned Ergo. I wanted to talk a little bit about that, just a little bit. But just to finish up with Yoroi, just because I know that's the crown jewel of what you guys are working on. Sebastien, could you tell us any goals that you guys are focusing on? I know we talked a bit about these native assets. We talked about smart contracts. But I guess, as you guys are focusing now on seeing all these features, are there any specific goals going out throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah, so for Ergo, that was done with a grant from the Ergo Foundation. And so we received this amount of Ergo tokens to kind of develop stuff for the ecosystem. And we want to kind of scope it in a way that we want to do stuff for Ergo that also helps our Cardano ecosystem grow. So what did we actually build? We built an Oracle system for Ergo. We built a stable coin for Ergo. We built integration in Yoroi, and part of the integration involved, multi-asset support. We had multi-asset support in Yoroi before that was actually supported by Cardano because we had to implement multi-asset support for Ergo. And that's why we were able to get stuff done fairly fast. This, for example, this Dap connection functionality, we're doing it for Ergo first, but a lot of the UI, the concept, the API, and all that we'll be able to reuse for Cardano. And we feel like a lot of the work we've done has benefited both communities greatly, but it's not a perpetual contract. Right? We're not like committed to develop Ergo forever. This is an agreement with the Ergo Foundation, and so we feel like we've mostly delivered on the scope of our agreement, and hopefully with the launch of the Ergo connector, that'll be kind of the completion of our scope. There's stuff we'd like to have in the future, like Ergo support for Yoroi Mobile, and we did some work on that front, but there is some extra work that needed to be done on the Ergo WebAssembly library to have better mobile support. And we already contributed to some parts to this Ergo library for adding some interesting functionality we did for the extension. But at a certain point, we have to say, okay, what is in the scope of our agreement and what's kind of out of scope? And we thought probably revamping this API to add more mobile functionality, it's a lot of work and possibly kind of out of scope of our initial agreements. And we feel like for the amount we asked from the Ergo Foundation, we've delivered a huge amount of value to the ecosystem. And so we'd love to work with Ergo again as a project and as a foundation. And so we're very much open to future projects that we think will be beneficial not just for Ergo, but for Cardano holders as well.
Yeah, I've been following Ergo ever since I heard about the partnership between Emurgo and Ergo. And some of the things that I was really interested in when I first heard about it was they were doing the Age USD stable coin. There were things like Oracle pools and just a whole bunch of technical things that at the time I was like, okay, this is interesting. So it'll be nice to see some of those things that you guys have already worked on with Ergo. And, you guys now have the technical proficiency and understanding and, being able to make it that much easier for you guys to see those functionalities in Yoroi for ADA and other native tokens. So that's very interesting. That's really cool. As far as what we're seeing with Ergo, I know you guys had pretty much, touched on the topics there, but I mean, would you say, is there anything that you guys are focusing on as it relates to seeing Ergo specifically treated like ADA in the wallets? Like you would have the web extension. The web extension's got Ergo, right? Like it can support Ergo as well as other native tokens. But you said waiting on mobile support, right? So like as far as Ergo's prominence with Yoroi, like where do you see that going in the future?
Yeah, so I think the next steps for us is once we have this Ergo connector done, we're going to be talking with developers to get this, actually included inside their existing dApps. So their dApps in Ergo right now, the way they work is kind of less than ideal because of the fact that there's no standard Dap connector in the Ergo ecosystem. But once we have that final version released, we'll be talking with developers to get that integrated. And we think this will kind of open up a lot more usage for the Ergo ecosystem and a lot more usage for the Yoroi wallet as well. We've already have some developers kind of playing around with our Dap connector currently, and they're giving us feedback, and there's some stuff that we're trying to improve in the UI and the user experience. We're kind of in the final stages of that, and so that's the kind of main focus right now. And the way the Dap connector works is that we're hoping to have one Dap connector for Ergo and for ADA. And so anybody who downloads this Yoroi Dap connector will be able to choose which currencies to support. And so if a user comes on and onboards to Yoroi from the Ergo ecosystem. I'm an Ergo user. I love Ergo. Let me see what wallets out there, and they see, oh, Yoroi's out there, and to use my Ergo Dapps, and you get the Ergo connector. They're now automatically onboarded to the Cardano ecosystem as well. So because Yoroi also supports ADA, and the Dap Connector they just downloaded will also support Cardano. And so we think there's going to be a lot of ways to kind of grow the ecosystem together, because if you're a Dap developer and for some reason you want to make your Dap available on both Cardano and Ergo at the same time, you'll be able to know that any user who comes in with a Dap connector probably most likely already has an ADA wallet and an Ergo wallet, and you'll be able to service both of them. If they don't have a wallet, an Ergo wallet, or they don't have an ADA wallet, it will easily tell them, hey, you already have the tool, let's just go in and press these buttons and it'll be set up for the other currency as well.
Nice. I really like that. So there's similarities there, with the Dap extensions, with having the support for these tokens. I think that's great. I really like how the partnership has kind of evolved into something that you're seeing the functionalities, which you can kind of, mimic, so to speak, throughout all these different assets. So that's really awesome, man. I really enjoy that. Sebastien, so I know you're calling us from Japan. I wanted to know a little bit more about your life in Japan. I know, you had just recently mentioned that you had moved. Was it Tokyo that you had moved to, or Tokyo? Okay. How's life been in Japan?
Yeah, so Japan is like many other countries, facing difficulties with the coronavirus. So Japan's situation with corona is much better than most other countries. But it's still, people take it very seriously, and so it's very hard to go out there and do a lot of the networking that would be great for example, a Cardano hub, or trying to grow the Cardano community in Japan. And so people are doing their best given the situation. So we do Zoom meetings online and limited in-person meetings, and I try and network the best I can. But obviously there's limits to what I can do. So it's been now 4 months since I've come to Tokyo. So it's been a while. But I was obviously in Japan since joining Emurgo. So I've been in Japan for a long time, but I was not in Tokyo originally, because there's no particular reason for me to be in kind of Tokyo, which is kind of an expensive city to live in, and kind of a busy city. Like within the greater metropolitan area, there's 14 million people, and it's kind of tiny area. So unless you really want to live that lifestyle, there's not as much merit to being here. And so originally when I came to Japan, I went to Kyoto, which is much calmer, much very scenic location if you've ever been there. But as the Cardano community has grown a lot in Japan, and there's kind of a lot of players running their own stake pools based in Tokyo, I thought it made sense to, instead of being in Kyoto, which is a very nice place, be in Tokyo, which is more a better place to be in if you want to start networking and building community and getting all these people together and for potential projects. And hopefully, obviously we have, Discord chats for the Japanese community, and we have the Line groups, which is the main chat application in Japan. And we have, as I mentioned, we have some limited offline events. Hopefully, as Corona situation hopefully improves in the future and the Cardano ecosystem grows, we'll be able to, connect people better and grow the Cardano community here as well.
Awesome. I know with COVID, it's like there's a bit of compromises you got to make, and always trying to look at the bright side. It's trying to spread the good word about Cardano, as far as being an ambassador and, helping the network and all that kind of stuff. So I totally hear you, man. You just gotta make the best of it. And well, I'm just glad to hear that you're enjoying it so far. I did have a few questions. I guess you could say maybe just a few firecracker questions, just about life in Japan. I'm a big fan of the Japanese culture. I even named the YouTube channel after the Japanese Kaizen. So, I definitely do resonate a lot with the Japanese culture, and I'm always curious to know more about it. But just 3 firecracker questions for you, man, just to have some fun before we close out for today. Is there anything about the Japanese culture that resonates with you on a personal level?
Oh, that's a tough one, because there's so much, right? It's such different culture than you get in North America. So it'd be hard to pinpoint one thing. I think one thing that I've always kind of liked about the Japanese culture is the respect for the work people do. So I feel like in North America, private property is not quite respected as much, I feel, as in Japan. So obviously, the concept of private property is strongly ingrained in American culture. But crime rates, property vandalism, this kind of rate is much higher in North America. Privacy is not, piracy is not taken as seriously. People are mostly okay with, taking other people's artwork and reposting it wherever for whatever purpose. And that has some downsides and some upsides to it. You can have a whole argument about that. But in Japan, the crime rate is much lower. People have a much, stronger sense of don't, touch other people's stuff. And, whenever people make art, people have a strong concept of, don't reuse somebody's art unless you get the permission, you pay for it. And I feel like sometimes it's a bit, too much, and it kind of the free flow of not just information but also art and culture has some benefits. But I've always respected this fact that people tend to by default respect other people's artwork, or respect other people's efforts or other people's belongings.
Sure, sure. I think that plays on a broader sense too. Whenever I would see somebody that would go and greet another in Japan, there would always be a bow. You could definitely just see that level of mutual respect. So yes, absolutely. So two other quick ones, Sebastian. So what is the strangest thing you've ever eaten in Japan?
Strangest thing I've ever eaten. Yeah, there's kind of some traditional answers that I can give that are like, you might have heard of natto, which is like the fermented soybeans, which kind of a strange taste and super sticky. I feel like most people who have come to Japan have had this experience of trying to eat this, because this is a popular food in Japan that unless you grew up with it, it's often kind of hard to get into. I did have one thing that's not a standard answer, but I thought it was really strange. It was horse sushi. So obviously sushi is usually fish, but you can get the same concept with horse meat instead. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. I've never heard of this. And I tried it, and it was okay, I guess.
Wow.
But yeah, that was kind of it never occurred to me you could have sushi, but with just different animals.
Yeah, never heard of that one. That's new to me. Well, very cool. I got one more for you, Sebastian. I love these answers so far, by the way. If you could visit any place in Japan, any place, let's say if you had never been there before, where would it be?
Yeah, so I used to come here occasionally when I was a university student, just to kind of go across the country. And so I've already been to, not all of Japan, but many places I wanted to have already been. There's some places, unfortunately, I've never had the chance to go, like Hokkaido, which is the northern part of Japan, that I really wanted to go to. Similarly, I've never been to Okinawa, which is the south end of Japan, South Island. So these are probably the two places that I really love to go, because I just haven't had the chance to go there yet.
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. So Sebastian, that was quite a bit of fun there, just learning a little bit more about your life in Japan. I know it's always a great opportunity to get a chance to speak with people who come from different places all around the world. It's amazing to see how diverse this community really is. So I always enjoy just getting a chance to learn more about community members on a more personal level. But I really did learn a lot from this, Sebastian, talking about all the things that you guys are working on with Yoroi and what you're doing there at Emurgo. So I guess above anything, really just thank you so much for all the hard work. Thanks so much for working with the Ergo guys, getting Ergo added to Yoroi. I know a lot of people were excited about that. So, keep up the great work, man. Before we wrap up for today, any final remarks before we sign off?
Yeah, so I'd just like to say thank you to everybody else. Obviously, no project is done by one person. For Yoroi, I wrote a lot of code. For our mobile SDK, I wrote a lot of code. So obviously, I do a lot of work myself, but it's not a one-man show. We have other engineers also working for Emurgo. We have people in the community also doing great work, such as yourself. And great project is never built by one person. So thank you to everybody who's been, working hard to grow the Cardano ecosystem. If you're listening to this podcast and you've gone all the way to this point, probably you care a lot about Cardano and you've done a lot in the ecosystem yourself. So thank you. And yeah, thanks for having me on. Just in general, I always love to come and talk about the work we're doing. And, I'll always love to use kind of the position I have to help grow other channels and people trying to grow their presence in the Cardano ecosystem. So it's always great to come on these podcasts and spread the word and get more people involved.
That's awesome. All right, Sebastien, thanks so much again, man. Always a pleasure. Would be great to have you on again to chat very soon. All right, man. Take care. We'll talk soon.